welcome to the 38th Annual Martin Luther King Day Celebration. Did you all get enough of that wonderful cake and cookies over there? Excellent. This year's theme is We Are More Alike Than Different. My name is James McKim. I am a managing partner of the management consulting firm Organizational Ignition and an acting president of the Manchester branch of the NAACP, and I'll be your MC for this afternoon's program.
Great.
This is a program I'm sure that through recognition, celebration, conversation, and song will convince you that we are more alike than different. A message I think we need now more than ever in our nation's history. The Martin Luther King Coalition has organized annual observances of Dr. King's birthday since 1983. We give thanks to the diverse local organizations who helped put this on, dedicated to carrying on Dr. King's work to end racism, eliminate poverty, and promote peace through active nonviolence. Those organizations are listed on page 6 of your program. We give special thanks to our financial sponsors, the Manchester Education Association, the Greater Manchester NAACP, the National Education Association of New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Council of Churches, SEIU Local 1984, New Hampshire Veterans for Peace, and Temple Adet Yeshurun, our host here today. This event would not be possible without their support, so please give them a round of applause. This event would also not be possible without the work of the MLK Coalition Organizing Committee. Committee members are listed on the back of your program. Would committee members please stand so we can show you our appreciation for your hard work in putting this event together. We are honored to have several dignitaries here today. Because we have so many, we're not going to name them all, but if you are an elected official, dignitary, please stand and be recognized. We thank you for your service. In a special remembrance, we have learned that Sandra Hicks, our first MLK Award winner and mentor and mother to many of us, is just gone into hospice. And, you know, we have several of her family here. Alan, her son, is here, and he created a little write-up on her that I'd like to read to you. Sandra moved to Manchester, New Hampshire with her now deceased husband Wade and sons Roger and Alan in the middle 1960s. And outside of a 3-year period where she moved to California for health reasons, she's called New Hampshire home ever since. Very proud of her Native and African American heritage, her family is very important to her, and she celebrates her 2 sons and an adopted daughter, Karen, 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, and several foster children, many of them us. Born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, she was the middle child of 5 siblings. Her primary education was received in Boston, and her first secondary education experience began at Boston University, expanding across the country continuing at San Bernardino Community College, San Diego Community College, and finally back home again at Notre Dame College, some of us remember, here in Manchester. Rendered legally blind in 1975 while working as a mental health therapist at the then Manchester Mental Health Center, Sandra eventually retired. And that is when she began her life of activism and advocacy. And later became known for working for social justice and community education and service. In her work against domestic and sexual violence in the 1980s, Sandra represented the state of New Hampshire at the national level, and for a number of years. She became an HIV/AIDS educator and counselor, and has worked for medical and mental health education inclusion for minorities, and in 1993 was the founder of the New Hampshire Minority Health Coalition and held a leadership role in that organization. A former board member to a number of community groups, longtime board member and officer of the Greater Manchester Black Scholarship Fund, advisor to the Manchester Hillsborough County Service Link Board, a treasurer and board member of Emerging Leaders of Community and Color, treasurer and steering committee member of the Manchester Regional Committee on Aging. This list could go on and on and on. For me personally, Sandra was a past president of the Manchester NAACP and helped take our organization to higher heights. I ask for just a moment of silence as we wish Sandra good wishes. Thank you. And to help carry on the work that Sandra did, we have a fishbowl out at the right at the door. If you'd like to contribute to the work that Sandra has dedicated her life to, please feel free to contribute there. And now I would ask Rabbi Beth Davidson to the stage for our invocation.
Good afternoon. I'd like to invite everyone to rise. In 1961, Reverend King wrote, "All life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. As long as there is poverty in this world, no man can be totally rich, even if he has $1 billion. As long as diseases are rampant and millions of people cannot expect to live more than 20 or 30 years, no man can be totally healthy, even if he's just got a clean bill of health from the finest clinic in America. Strangely, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. You can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the way the world is made." We gather today not only to remember the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., but to remind ourselves of his challenge. None of us can be who we ought to be until each of us has that opportunity. We are, in fact, our brothers and sisters' keepers, and it is up to each and every one of us to do what we can to bring about a world where each of us can sit under our vines and our fig trees in security, in comfort, and in peace. All life is interrelated, and we are woven together into a single garment of destiny. Let us do our part to ensure that that garment is sturdy and healthy cloth, woven of individual pieces that create a strong whole. And together let us say, Amen. Amen.
Don't get too comfortable, because we have for Auburn Village Middle School to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we move into the proclamation phase of the program. And it is my honor to read a proclamation from His Excellency Christopher T. Sununu, Governor. A proclamation. In the year of our Lord, 2020, Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day, January 20th, 2020. Whereas the Civil Rights Act of 1964 recognized the importance of diversity, non-discrimination, and freedom by prohibiting discrimination based on race in employment and education, and outlawing racial segregation in public facilities. And whereas the Bill of Rights states that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, nor deny any person within the jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And whereas in New Hampshire, we embrace our cultural diversity and work diligently to ensure that all of our citizens can live by our state's motto, live free or die. And whereas New Hampshire's Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day recognizes the work, spirit, and vision of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and helps us remember his many important, inspiring words. One of the most famous quotes where he states, "I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," has resonated with countless generations and is the standard by which we should all aspire to. And whereas Dr. King was instrumental in working with many other civil rights leaders to raise awareness for those being discriminated against, and his words and works and actions have been emulated by citizens across our great nation who also work towards justice and equality for all people. And whereas events will be held across the Granite State to raise awareness for the important work done by Dr. King and other civil rights leaders, and the state of New Hampshire is proud to recognize the important and inspiring work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, therefore, I, Christopher T. Sununu, Governor of the state of New Hampshire, do hereby proclaim January 20th, 2020 as Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day in the state of New Hampshire, and urge all citizens to recognize, encourage, and support the end of racial segregation and discrimination in their local communities and across the state. In testimony whereof, I have hereunder to set my hand and cause the seal of the state of New Hampshire to be affixed this 9th day of January 2020, signed Christopher T. Sununu, Governor.
hosting. You are always so welcoming, and your consistent message of equity and unity is so appreciated. Many, many thanks to the Martin Luther King Jr. Committee for organizing this wonderful event. We're gathered here today because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a vision of the beloved community. Dr. King's beloved community was a realistic, achievable goal that could be accomplished by a large group of people coming together and understanding that our individual well-being is directly linked to the well-being of others. That idea, that notion that to help ourselves, we must help others, is directly tied to the work that you all do in our community. By engaging in service, we strengthen our relationships with each other. And while we all come from different backgrounds and varying life experiences, we are all united by our desire to make our city and our state better. In an ever-changing world, it is imperative that we continue to highlight work that focuses on what unites us rather than what divides us. I want to congratulate all of the award winners here today, and especially to give a shout out to those Manchester residents, Manny Content and Sandalette. And it's truly an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon, and I thank you again for all of the work that you do. And with that, I have a resolution I'd like to read. The City of Manchester resolution. Be it known that the Office of the Mayor extends its congratulations to the Martin Luther King Coalition in recognition of the 38th Annual Martin Luther King Jr. Day Community Celebration, which provides an opportunity to congregate together, celebrate, and be inspired by the work and principles of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And be it further known that the Office of the Mayor extends its best wishes for continued success. Thank you.
Now it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you our senior senator, Senator Jean Shaheen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Mayor Craig, it's always wonderful to be in the city of Manchester. And nice to be here with all of the elected officials in the room, and of course with my colleagues, Senator Hassan and Congressman Pappas. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for coming out to celebrate this 20th anniversary of the Martin Luther King holiday. You know, like so many of you, the Martin Luther King holiday is really personal for me. As many of you know, I was honored to be the governor who got to sign into law the Martin Luther King holiday. New Hampshire was the last state in the country to adopt a Martin Luther King holiday, and it wasn't until 1999 that the state legislature passed the law after a number of efforts to try and do that, and I remember vividly that hot June afternoon with Martin Luther King III when we were out on the State House lawn for that signing ceremony, and I think everybody in New Hampshire celebrated that we were finally joining the rest of the nation and celebrating the MLK holiday. You know, it was personal for me not just because I had the opportunity to be in office and to sign that legislation, but it was also personal because as a child growing up in southern Missouri, I attended segregated schools. I had a view into the life that Martin Luther King was trying to address for so many people with the civil rights movement. I saw the daily injustices that he was working on. And when I later taught in a newly integrated school in Mississippi, I had a chance to see the opportunities that were becoming available because of Dr. King's efforts. It's really because of the inspirational work of Dr. King and the movement he inspired that we have made great strides in the march toward full equality. We haven't gotten there yet, as Dr. King would say, but we've got to keep moving down that road that makes progress. we have seen the doors of opportunity open for people of color, for women, for people of all faiths, for our LGBT community. And anytime we have progress in opening doors for one group, it sends hope and a message that we can open doors for others who have been discriminated against. And we can trace a lot of the progress in our society to the leadership of Dr. King and the sacrifices of so many people who endured unimaginable injustice in the fight for justice for everyone. So we're here to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But on this day, we should also all be inspired to act according to his example. I think of his words often, especially these days in Washington, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. It's important to remember, though, that it doesn't bend toward justice all by itself. It bends because of our actions, each individual, those actions big and small, to make the world a better, a fairer place. I hope you'll join me in renewing our commitment to get involved, to make a difference in people's lives, especially today as we look at what's happening across America, at the increasing number of hate crimes, at the divisions within our society that so often means, instead of trying to find compromise and to listen with civility and respect, we go to our respective corners and we come out fighting. Dr. King would have had us follow his example, to try and talk with each other, to try and find common ground, to try and move forward together as a community, as a state, as a country. Because that's what's in all of our interests, as Rabbi Davidson said so eloquently. So this is Dr. King's enduring legacy, and we should carry it with us today and every day. We should all strive to build Dr. King's beloved community of justice, equality, and love for all. Thank you all.
And now I have the honor and privilege of introducing our other state senator, Senator Peggy Hassett.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, James, for that introduction. It is so great to be here this afternoon with all of you, with my colleagues, Senator Shaheen and Congressman Pappas, with so many elected officials. Mayor Craig, thank you for welcoming us once again to Manchester. To Senator LeVick, thank you so much for being here. To all of the state representatives and elected officials, thank you for your work. We do democracy better than anywhere else in New Hampshire, and it's because of all of you. To Rabbi Davidson, thank you for your welcome and for your wonderful opening remarks and prayer. To Maxine Mosley, thank you for your leadership, and to the whole committee that organizes this event every year. Thank you. Thank you because you give us the opportunity to join together as we are this afternoon to reflect on Dr. King's life and to honor his work fighting to ensure that our country lives up to its ideals by respecting the freedom, equality, and dignity of all of our people. Through his commitment to nonviolent action and through his unshakable determination, Dr. King helped all Americans and people around the world understand and appreciate the importance of civil rights and social justice and its vital role in sustaining our democracy and our freedom. I suspect that all of us have a story to tell. I was listening as Senator Shaheen talked about her experience growing up in segregated schools. My dad shared that experience. He was a child of the Deep South. And it was actually, he would tell you, fighting during World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, the first time our armed services were integrated, that a light bulb went off for him. If African Americans could be sacrificing their lives for our country, why didn't they have equal rights at home? More personally, and recent for me is the experience of being the mom of a young man who happens to experience very severe physical disabilities. And early on in Ben's life, as I saw the opportunities that he had to go to public school, to learn with his friends, to be treated as a member of the community, I was reminded that it was champions that went before the Hassan family, champions like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who made that possible for us. There isn't anyone here who hasn't been helped by, hasn't been raised up by the message and work of Dr. Martin Luther King. That, of course, is the point. We gather together because we believe in the fundamental principle of Dr. King's message, that each and every one of us has a role to play in making change and making progress. And each and every one of us is capable of it. But we are also here, perhaps more importantly, because we realize that Dr. King's dream is one that has yet to be fully realized. We recognize that the fight for freedom and justice for all people is a constant one. And we are well aware that we have much more work to do. There is no doubt that we are at a moment in our country's history where we are once again seeing our march toward greater inclusion severely challenged. And as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I will echo what Senator Shaheen said. The statistics and data about the rise in hate crimes against many groups, but more than any other against African Americans, is of deep concern and should be of deep outrage to each and every one of us. In this moment, we have to ask ourselves, how do we respond to discrimination? How do we respond to injustice? How do we build a stronger America that values all of our people? It's on all of us to stand together, united, as Americans have in both good times and bad ones, to reject hatred and intolerance. We have to engage with our friends and neighbors, pointing out, perhaps, the real harm that staying silent in the face of harmful rhetoric can do. And reminding each other of the ways in which our country has gained strength and prospered when we have joined together to serve our common purpose of establishing justice. Or, as General Eisenhower said on the eve of D-Day, of marching with a liberty-loving people everywhere. And in the face of difficulty, we must fight for change and do all that we can to make progress. As Dr. King once said, quote, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but by all means keep moving. The beauty of Dr. King's message was that he understood that even in the darkest times, it's our duty to remain strong for each other and to continue to bring people together, to fight for freedom when we must, and to sustain and nurture freedom always. We must all take that lesson to heart and commit ourselves to fighting for the cause of inclusion and justice every day. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to further that commitment and to ensure that all of our citizens have the opportunity to share in Dr. King's dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And next on the docket, Congressman, the Honorable Congressman, Chris Mattis. Well, thank you very much, James, for the introduction, as well to the Manchester NAACP, to Maxine Mosley and our friends on the committee for organizing this event, and certainly to Rabbi Davidson and her community for welcoming us here today. It is an honor to be with all of you. It's certainly great to see my colleagues, Senator Shaheen and Hassan, as well as Mayor Craig, and so many elected officials joining us here today. I certainly remember the effort growing up in New Hampshire to make sure that we recognize the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. It took a lot of work from so many folks, many of them here in this room, and certainly Senator Shaheen
King's Act as governor, signing that into law was a good day for us. But if there are opportunities in the future for New Hampshire to lead and to be on the right side of history, we should be first and not last. We should be looking for ways to look out for everyone and send a signal that we are an inclusive, welcoming place where everyone has a fair shot. And so let's seize those opportunities when we can find them in the future. You know, today we mark the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I've been at several commemorations all over the state of New Hampshire, and it's wonderful to see the ways that people are coming forward to celebrate his words and deeds. We must acknowledge, though, that his work, which is our work, is far from finished. There is more work to do to perfect this union. We have urgent work ahead of us to address persistent racial, social, and economic inequalities that exist. We have urgent work ahead of us to stamp out hatred, bigotry, and racism wherever we see it. And we have urgent work ahead to bring people closer together. We're gathering here at a time when it can feel like events have taken us dangerously off course from the roadmap that Dr. King left us. Despite some good economic news, we know that the gap between the haves and the have-nots in this country has never been wider. We also know that race and geography often determine whether or not you get a shot at making it in America today. We've also seen hate rear its ugly head, with hate crimes on the rise and increasing acts of violence, including in our churches, our synagogues, and our community centers. Acts of violence that have no place in this country. That is not who we are, and that is certainly not in accordance with the teachings of Dr. King. We also feel divided as a country, and certainly we can see that politically speaking. And we've got to answer this division not by becoming more similar, but by getting closer together. The solution for us is not to all think the same way, vote the same way, or pray the same way. It's for us to deepen our sense of common purpose, to remember that we are truly our sisters and our brother's keeper, and to appreciate that America's diversity of race, religion, ideology, orientation, that diversity is our strongest asset. Our founders told us that out of many we would become one nation, and Dr. King showed us that we can achieve that goal by empowering each and every one among us to be a part of a shared destiny. There is more work to do to perfect this union. You know, Dr. King's words never cease to inspire us, but if they fail to move us to action, then what are they worth? Dr. King reminded us often of service. Life's most persistent and urgent question, he would say, is what are you doing for others? Many have seen Dr. King's holiday as a way to have a day on and not a day off. And there are amazing service projects happening across our communities and across our nation today. And one of the most wonderful things about New Hampshire is the way people step up. They look for ways to help one another. We have a great sort of array of nonprofit organizations that are building social capital, and there are significant ways that you can step up and be a part of those efforts, and I hope we will look for those ways every day of the year. But by coming together and serving others, we in New Hampshire can continue to model what it means to be a good citizen, what it means to look out for others. So Dr. King's life and legacy, it's not something simply for the history books. It should live and breathe within all of us. And we must continue to answer the call, because we clearly have more work to do. I'll leave you with one final quote from Dr. King. He said, "Everybody can be great, because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love." And so I hope we all go forward together in peace and love, standing shoulder to shoulder, looking for ways that we can serve others, looking for ways to make our communities a better place to live. Thank you all so much.
Such wonderful words. I think we need to give our representatives another round of applause. And now it is time for the Lionel Washington Johnson Youth Awards, and we have our own Maxine Mosley to present them.
Going up is easy, going down is tough.
Good afternoon. If you look around you, we have a full house. That's awesome. That's great. This is the best part of the day for me, is really presenting awards to our young people, who are our future. And today we have something very unique. We haven't done honorable mentions before, but we have a school, Auburn Village School, that has a teacher that made it her mission to make sure that each and every one of her students participated in this writing contest and understood social justice and understood the importance of Dr. King's work. So we will talk to her in just a minute. Now she's embarrassed. I do my best. Just so that you know, I have been a school counselor, I'm in my 41st year, and I know, it's like amazing. And I don't look that old. I feel it, but I don't look it. I'm here to represent National Education Association and my local peaks, the Manchester Education Association, and the work that our educators do across this state to help students learn about justice and equity. Because folks, if we don't teach them how to stand up and speak out against racism and about discrimination, we are all lost. Our youth have to learn to stand up and speak out. I leave this event every year inspired that I don't do enough, that I haven't said enough. I hope you all leave with a little bit of that because we can all do better. And we have some great warriors in this room that do better every day, even though I think that they are models for how we can conduct ourselves. So let me start with our honorable mentions. If you folks would come up on stage, these are all students from Auburn Village School. Our first award winner is Gabrielle Bedard, honorable mention. MLK. How many students did you have that entered this contest?
I had quite a few. I had 5th and 6th grade.
5th and 6th grade public speaking from Auburn. Thank you. You're going to see them back in just a few minutes. Now, it's very difficult for adults to get up here and speak, though not me. Take a lot of years, not good. But our young winners are going to read their essays for you. They're both very, very different. They were chosen as statewide award winners because of the work they did. In second place from Auburn Village School, Anna Stanton. Anna is a 5th grader. First of all, before you read, Miss Anna, we have a beautiful plaque for you and a check for $50.
September 10th, 1867. I didn't like speeches. They were long, boring, and full of stupid stuff. I'm a 6-year-old African-American girl named Kakuzi Soja. That's all you need to know about me, but now on with the story. I had to go to some real-world speech with Ella and Max. This is Ella's mom. She doesn't like me much and kind of treats me like a servant, but I don't care. I'm going to run away with Ella to Philadelphia soon enough, though. Anyway, I have to go to this Martin Luther King speech and stuff, and Ella is going to take me. And after the speech, we're going to hit the train to Philadelphia and head to the speech now. Okay, I was wrong about speeches. They're amazing and inspiring. Well, at least his was. I can't write down the speech because it's too long, but we are getting ready to hit the tracks, so I'll tell you about what happens once we're on the train. September 13th, 1867. Sorry for the delay. I was tired once we got on the train and I completely forgot yesterday, so here's what happened. Because I'm black, I had to go into a different train booth. So what happened was that once Ella had bought tickets, the guards brought me into the box for the black, and boy, it certainly wasn't as nice as the boxes for white people. For one, there were no seats, so people were just sitting on the floor milling about. Also, there was no carpet, just a big dirty sheet nailed to the floor. There was one scared girl in the corner that looked about my age. So I went to go sit down next to her. She sighed. I'm Harberito. Call me Kakuju, I said. Where are you going? Harberito asked. Philadelphia, I said. Me too. Why, are you going with someone else, I asked. No, one of my parents was black and the other was white. They could never be together. So for a few years I lived at an orphanage, but times changed. I had to leave. I spent on this train and dwelt on here. Oh, we'll see you in Philadelphia, I said. Yeah, see you there, said Harberito, and she smiled. Now Ella and I are on the 3rd train to Philadelphia. We'll be there shortly and I'm getting tired. Also, sleeping on the floor isn't the most comfortable thing. I don't know how soon I'll be able to write again, but that's all for now. Wish me luck. Good night. Diary. The future social. December 13th, 1867. Sorry it's been so long, but so much has happened yet so little. You're getting rather full, so I'll have to get a new one soon, but I thought I might finish this one first. I saw this amazing thing happen yesterday. Here's what happened. I came outside into the backyard of me and Ella's new house to an amazing sight. Black children, white children, playing together, building a snowman, dealing with the same interests, the same problems. It was like Christmas magic. Also, I always make sure to watch all of Martin Luther King speeches when they're on the TV. What I'm trying to say here is that white people, black people, we are more like the different cookies and soldiers. The end.
By the way, it's Anna's birthday today. Happy birthday brought his grandparents, his parents, his family. We are so honored to invite him up to the stage. 8th grader, stand up and speak. As he's coming out, he gets a check for $100 and a wonderful plaque.
Martin Luther King Jr. was many things, and most can agree that his words empowered and inspired us all to better ourselves and help fix the complicated problems of society. MLK started as a young boy with a dream, with almost no means to accomplish it. But he never gave up on America. He believed that he could better us as a nation, and did just that. We can all take inspiration from his words, whether it be fighting for equality or something else you believe in. Some of his words can be applied to anybody, such as the quote, "We got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't really matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." To break this apart, you have to go sentence by sentence. In the sentence, "We got some difficult days ahead," he's talking about the struggles of human life. None of us will ever get to live the perfect, carefree life. There will always be death, poverty, broken dreams, and other challenges throughout it. The next sentence is, "But it doesn't really matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop, I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land." This says that life can always get better, and if you keep on living and prevailing, you will see the promised land, a place of which you desire. So never give up and never give in to the tragedies that try to push us down the mountain. The promised land is something that everyone looks forward to, and if we keep the mental image with us, we can get through anything. The next part is, "I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." This is saying that we might not all be at the top at the same time, but humanity as a whole will get there. After analyzing the quote, you can replace certain metaphorical words with your own. For example, the promised land is what we look forward to, and for me, it might be something totally different than from anybody else. The mountain is a metaphor for a challenge. That could be anything that can hinder you. And the hike up that mountain is getting through those troubles and persevering. 1 year ago, if you had read me this quote, I would have mistaken it for any other inspiring thing that somebody said. But over the course of this summer, this quote has made me feel better. All my life has been easy for me, but unfortunately, over the summer, I returned from a summer camp to hear that my uncle, who I was really close to, had passed away at age 15. I was, and still am devastated. I went from a smooth road to a high mountain that I still haven't finished climbing. This quote has given me hope that one day I'll reach the top of this mountain and see the promised land we all seek. Thank you.
All of our young people to join me down here, as well as any of our politicians or people that just feel young at heart, so we can do our bell ringing. This has become our annual tradition. These are chimes, so I'm gonna give everybody the chime instruction. If you wanna join us, we have more chimes. We got plenty. Who else wants to chime? Come on down. Looking for those young at heart. Comes Samuel's brother. This is good. Who else? We got more. All right. So being in New Hampshire, and Dr. Martin Luther King talked about the prodigious hills, and bell ringing is very important. So we're going to ring some bells for you. I'm going to lead these lovely people. All you have to do is lift them up and drop them down like this. Ready? 1. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the program.
Give them another round of applause. At this point, we're going to get you all involved. So as you can see in your program, this is the point where we're going to sing, lift every voice, and sing, which was lyrics by Rosamond Johnson and music by James Weldon Johnson. Everybody stand up. As you are able. You've been sitting for a while, so you want to stand up and stretch, right? Lift every voice and sing, and ring with the harmonies of liberty. Wachowski and Lemuel Cohen, which was a response to a call for scores for a new collection of social justice songs. Their song was selected and is now part of a new movement called Justice Choir, which provides songs free of charge for anyone to sing, that means you all, for non-commercial use at concerts, marches, protests, and in houses of worship. So please sit back and enjoy We Walk in Love. And now, it's time for a panel discussion. The topic, We the People, Relooking at the People's Campaign. Now, 51 years ago, the Poor People's Campaign, under the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King and others, called for a revolution of values, in which they invited people to stand together against militarism, racism, and economic injustice. Drawing on that history, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has emerged in 39 states, including New Hampshire. If you've been, how many people have been to a Poor People's Campaign rally? Good, a third of you or so. So, those of you who have been to a rally are aware that there's a chant that is chanted, Poor People's Rally, Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. It's a part of the effort. Why don't we chant that phrase now? Ready? The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. How does it make you feel to chant those words? Hopeful? Does it make you feel good? Is it expressive? Does it make you feel sad? Think about that. Think about how those words make you feel. We are honored to have a panel of distinguished activists who will share a bit about the history of the Poor People's Campaign, the power of grassroots voices and the continuing work that is before us as we confront the social justice issues for today and tomorrow. Leading this panel is a Nashua native who currently lives in Brookline, a businesswoman, former member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and New Hampshire's first black senator. Her efforts have spanned infrastructure, healthcare, social justice, and economic justice. Currently, she chairs the New Hampshire Senate Election Law Committee. Most notably for me, she co-sponsored the recently passed Juneteenth bill. And I'm told that in her free time, she sings in the choir at Nashua Baptist Church. You're welcome to join our choir at any time, Senator. So I'm proud to turn the stage over to our own State Senator, Melanie. And the panelists will also come up.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So it's an honor to be here, to be sitting among some of the premier New Hampshire activists. And I don't just mean the people on the panel, but also the people in this room. So I'd like to start off with an introduction from each of our panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Debbie Akramala. I am the co-chair of the New Hampshire For People's Campaign and National Call Tomorrow Revival. I am a researcher, but my passion happens to be being a disability organizer and advocate. I have 3 children and one who is severely impacted by disabilities. So those are the lenses that I bring to the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Thomas. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having us all here. I live in Merrimack, and I'm the mother of 6 children. I'm also the executive director of the New Hampshire Challenge, which is a nonprofit that advocates for the disabled community. I was recently elected as a New Hampshire state representative for my town. And perhaps most importantly, I come here as a water warrior. I'm one of the few people in Merrimack that were elected to help fight against the pollution from an industrial polluter in our town that has poisoned our water. We are the tiny Davids that are raising our fists against the mighty Goliath that is industry and profit over people. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Will Hopkins. I'm the Executive Director of New Hampshire Peace Action. I've been there for about 10 years. And I got there via a tour in Iraq as an infantryman in 2004 and 2005.
Thank you. We'd like to hand the mic over to Dr. Deb Akramala to give us some opening words about the Poor People's Campaign and the 4 areas of intersection.
In 1968, Dr. King and others envisioned a Poor People's Campaign, where we would come together and unite together under 3 pillars. Poverty, which you call materialism, racism and systemic racism, and militarism. The New Poor People's Campaign has taken up those reins, but also included ecological devastation. Underneath these pillars, if we stay in our silos and just handle our issues, it's easy to be picked off. It's easy to be broken. So we practice fusion organizing, where we come together and find the intersections and the same problems and issues that we might be facing together and rise together to form a powerful union. And that's what we are working hard here in New Hampshire to bring nationally and to our legislative body.
Thank you. If you can keep the mic for a moment, I'd like to ask you, how do you see the 4 pillars intersecting in New Hampshire?
Well, I like to, because I'm a disability organizer, I'm going to use that lens as it's easy for me. My son, who is impacted by a disability, is very disconcerting about being on Medicaid and health care. In our family, we believe that everybody has an opportunity to work. But he could lose his Medicaid benefits if he earns too much money. So, healthcare is very important to our family. That's an interconnection. Many of you here are very interested in healthcare, universal healthcare for all. But not only that, most people in this state has the same problem. They live in poverty. 67.1% of those who are impacted by disability are unemployed. But the only statistic that you hear from New Hampshire, from the power, is that we have a 2.6 unemployment rate. So I believe that's an intersection where we can work together. That's one of many that are here in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Dr. Deb. And I'd like to ask the same question of both of you as well.
Sure. When an industry comes into your town and pollutes your water, it affects the town in many different ways. The most obvious is that the water is undrinkable. On a level that perhaps is not as obvious is that people get sick. And in our town, we've had people lose their houses. We've had people not be able to pay for their medical costs because the water has made them sick. Property values go down. I have a private well. My well is so contaminated that we have to cap our well. Anybody want to buy a house? There's no way I'm going to be able to ever sell that house until it gets remediated. Another issue with having contaminated water is that how do you protect yourself? So you buy bottled water. Rich people will be able to buy a lot of water. Rich people will be able to put in these $3,000 filtration systems, and they'll be able to pay the $300 to $500 a year upkeep for those systems. It's the poor people that can't afford this. The government recommends that you, if in a case of an emergency, that you have a 1 gallon of water per person per day. So for a family of 7, that's $28 a week just to buy safe water. That's a lot of money for a lot of families. And it's not, again, it's not fair because we didn't do this to ourselves. An industry did it to us. We never asked for this in our water. But it's the poor people in our town and the people who are financially insecure that get hurt the most.
So coming from military and militarism perspective, when we look at the last decade or so of U.S. foreign policy, it's focused in Iraq, Afghanistan, where there was a pipeline that was supposed to go through that was blocked, Venezuela, Libya, Syria, all countries that have direct fossil fuel connections of one type or another. And U.S. foreign policy frequently revolves around getting access to fossil fuel. The U.S. military is the largest user of fossil fuels on the planet. So ecological devastation is pretty clear that militarism is a driver of that and is driven by the consumption of fossil fuels. When it comes to economics, those who join the military are frequently there because of a poverty trap, because they need access to food and water and shelter and healthcare, and the military offers that. So militarism is enabled by the economic injustice that we're seeing around the country. When it comes to racism, we certainly aren't invading countries where there are people with light-colored skin. Brown and black people are getting bombed and killed. And that's seen as acceptable to a wide segment of our populace because they're not white. And I think that that's a key element of driving militarism. So from my perspective, I see myself as a peace activist. But being a peace activist means that I have to also be an anti-racist activist. It means I have to be an environmental activist. It means I have to be an economic justice activist, because all of those things are tied together, and moving forward one means moving forward them all.
Thank you very much. Certainly covered a lot of bases there. Thank you. On the topic of healthcare, several sources report serious health inequities in New Hampshire unfairly and disproportionately affect communities of color. What do you see as a cause of health inequities, and what steps would help to close the gap? And I'm going to ask Dr. Deb.
Wow. Closing the gap, as a doctor, we have to establish quality, accessible health care. And I can't tell you I don't support one plan over the other, but I do know that you have to have access. But not only do you have to have access to that in form of payment, you have to have doctors in your community. You know, we have pulled away from services in our communities of color. They're not there. When you have transportation issues, you know, we don't have buses in a lot of places that actually run well. When you have a medical desert, it's hard to think about preventative medicine instead of thinking about the bill that you have to incur and how you're going to get there. And once you get there, will the physician or the nurse practitioner understand my culture? And so it's a very complex question, because it's not just about whether you have your copay paid or not. It's whether the professional is trained to treat me with dignity and respect.
Thank you. On the topic of minimum wage, I'm going to go to the next topic, if you don't mind. And well, I'm going to ask both of you since you're a legislator. So on the topic of minimum wage, New Hampshire currently has no minimum wage and falls back to the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. The minimum wage is currently before our state legislature. What problems are caused or made worse by this low minimum wage?
Everything. Absolutely everything. So it falls healthcare. That's just one example. Recently, in our family, we had a very significant health concern, and the doctor wanted us to take an ambulance to the hospital. It wasn't life or death, and they just wanted to bring him to the ER to be checked out. In my mind, I kept thinking, what is the cost of an ambulance? How much is this gonna, we have insurance, But everybody's heard those stories about how you have to pay for an ambulance because it wasn't a life or death situation or something like that. And I begged with the doctor, my car is in the parking lot, please let me drive him. No one should have to do that. Again, in my town where we have the contamination, we have people getting very sick. There's an impact. If you're making $7.25 an hour, I talked about the cost of providing your own water. You've got that cost. If you're making $7.25, I guarantee you aren't eating organic food. You're eating whatever's the cheapest thing that's out there. A friend of mine who has 2 jobs, on the days that she goes from one job to another, she allows herself $3 to pay for food. And she tells me at 7-Eleven they have pizza, a slice of pizza for $1 that's really good. And I'm sure it is good, but when you're eating that every day, you're gonna get sick. So minimum wage is just, it's a chain around your neck that just keeps you down. There's no way you can rise on minimum wage.
I mean, starting with economic inequality and the reality that we have CEOs raking in billions of dollars every year, the reality that if you can't afford to pay a living wage, you shouldn't be trying to employ people. You can't afford an apartment working 40 hours a week in New Hampshire at minimum wage. You can't afford to feed your children. And it comes back to a poverty graph. Your choice is find a union job, which is great if you can find it. But if you're in, let's say, manufacturing, union job means you're going to be building weapons systems in New Hampshire because that's what we have. If you happen to be an educator, you can get a union job educating. If you happen to be a nurse or a doctor, but otherwise you're going to be stuck making lower income, and that it's a matter of dignity and people being allowed to live and have their basic needs met, and the reality that we can do this. Like our economy can support more. We know that because the haves have way more than they ever had before. So a minimum wage means that the have-nots can have something so that they can survive.
I would like to say one of the PPC's demands is $15 an hour. We already know that $15 an hour, like Will said, will not cover a 2-bedroom apartment. In front of our legislator right now, we're talking about going to $12 in 2023, I think. And the answer to that is no. We need 15 now. So we stand firm with that. Our cry is everybody has a right to live, and $7.25 is not it.
Thank you all. The next topic is environmental contamination, which Wendy knows a lot about. Many people recognize that environmental contamination and climate change affects everyone on the planet, but not all of us feel their effects equally. How does ecological devastation affect poor communities, communities of color, and the disabled and other people disproportionately?
Again, I keep talking about the water. I live in southern New Hampshire where we have this issue from an industrial polluter. There's also a problem on the seacoast with Pease Airport where they used firefighting foam. So what this is doing is that corporations are making money. We meet with the corporation in our town, which is Saint-Gobain. We have a community advisory committee, and we meet with them, and they're talking in this last meeting about justifying the cost of removing some drain pipes on the roof. They have about 20 drain pipes. To replace it would be about $20,000. The reason that they need to be replaced is they're coated with this PFAS chemical. So every time it rains, the rainwater is bringing the PFAS chemical into our water supply. So they're trying to justify the $20,000 to pay for this relatively minor cost. This is a multi-billion-dollar company that's headquartered in France. None of the CEOs live in southern New Hampshire where this problem is. And this company did the same thing in Vermont, and then they did the same thing in New York State, and then they came to our town and did the exact same thing. This is their MO. And what they do is, you'll notice that these companies that do things like this, they never locate in rich communities. They locate into the communities that are lower class, lower educated, because they can get away with it. So one of the things we did this summer is we organized a protest. And we got 60 people, which for Merrimack was just amazing. And we stood across the street just holding signs and saying, "We are here." Like Horton Hears a Who, "We are here." And they listened to us and they started the committee. So we're making inroads a little bit, but it's very difficult when you don't have the money to protect yourself and you don't have the money to form a coalition to fight them.
One of the pillars is the environment for the PPC. And this is where coalition building gets a little difficult. Because the disability community does believe in climate change. And it does understand the pollution of water. But you have to understand the footprint when you say ban single-use items. Okay. But you see, a plastic straw is a single-use item. When we go out, that's how my son drinks out of a cup. So I know people think, well, there's straws, there's metal, but he can't use them. He'll collapse a paper, and his palate isn't that great for a metal straw. So the disability community worked very hard to get people to understand, because many of us saw on our Facebook page the plastic straw stuck in the turtle's nose that they had to pull out with pliers, right? That is less than 1.00% of plastic straws. So we had to come to an understanding that please allow the plastic straw. If you don't need one, don't ask for one. But allow my son the dignity to ask for his plastic straw and not have the wait staff give it to us rudely. But that's coalition building. That's listening to each other, it's finding that common ground. Okay? That's what we do.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. Are there any other questions out there? There were some cards that we had. Do we have any other? Okay, there's one back here. We are asking questions that are based on some of the cards that we got, but just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. Run that up here. I have those 30 minutes. How will the Poor People's Campaign address sexism in America, such as the pay gap, reproductive rights, and the lack of family leave, and the high cost of child care that fall on women's shoulders? Good question. Okay.
We address all of the isms in our demands. You know, the pay gap can't happen any longer. We demand equality of pay. And we demand that women control their own bodies. A very good friend of mine said, "I don't believe in abortion." My answer was, "Don't have one." And we also say to those who say to us, "I'm pro-life," then my answer is, then you're pro-healthcare, food stamps, all those things that seem to be cutting out of our budget, because you have to be pro about that too. So the demands are there. We have a moral agenda in the budget. If you go to the poorpeoplescampaign.org, you can see all of our demands. But for that question, know that we have taken direct action over all those. When we first started a year ago, 40 days, we had 6 weeks of actions, nonviolent civil disobedience, and Will and I had the privilege of being arrested the first week. And we addressed all those issues. We're not hiding behind them at all, but that is something that we're moving forward in talking to, as we say, we are going to the people's house and we talk about it, and are forcing our legislators to look at those questions.
Thank you. Could we get one other quick response on that one?
As a former steering committee member of the Poor People's Campaign, I'll say that the analysis that brought down the 4 pillars it's an extension from King's analysis. As we talk about what the pillars are that hold systems of injustice in place, I know for me, smash the patriarchy is one of the key reactions I have to making a more just society. And that's not one of the pillars doesn't mean that it's not part of everyone's individual analysis as we think about moving forward and making a more just world. So thank you for your question, and I'm not sure that does much to answer it beyond saying that you should bring that to the steering committee by joining.
And I just wanted to quickly say the best way to address women's issues, and everything that was on that list is a women's issue, is to lift women. And the way that you lift women is you start with the girls and you lift the girls. You give them dignity, you give them opportunities, you give them education. And also vote for women. Women, we voted in the most, this year in the legislature, we voted in the most number of women ever. And we're making a difference because women have a different mindset. We think about the family, we think about our communities. And so all of those issues, it's the women that are going to take control. Thank you.
Girl power. I just want to thank everybody on the panel, and we're going to close with some words from Dr. Deb about the Poor People's Campaign.
Many of you might be thinking, what's next? What can I do? Well, we're called the Poor People's Campaign for a reason. Not only do we unite together in poverty, but we're looking for people to get on the bus. June 20, 2020. Come with us for the second march on Washington. Live the King dream. That costs money. So it's $100 a seat on the bus. $100 is a lot of money. And we're not asking everybody to donate $100, but we're asking you to donate what you can. And if you want to come on the bus and can't afford the $100, the steering committee will figure it out. Because that's what we do. But we also are providing things, educational things like an art build. We'll be making some t-shirts and some banners, educating around what the Poor People's Campaign demands are, and building community. So, if you would like to donate a little money for ink for the t-shirts, if anybody has muslin cloth they would like to donate, please do. These are all things that we provide free. And we, at the end of June, we are beginning to plan an art build, and I hope everybody comes. It's fun, and it's a way to come into community together, to know each other. So that's what we're planning for the Poor People's Campaign.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for being here today.
So if we can have the choir come back out. Wasn't that a great panel? Give them another hand of applause. And reminder that if you want more information about the Poor People's Campaign, there are tables out in the entryway where you can get more information. And also the reminder about the contribution for continuing the work of smith-hicks, the fishbowl near the door. The choir would like to perform for you now a selection that was co-written and performed by John Lennon. It was the best-selling single of his solo career. Its lyrics encourage us all to imagine a world at peace, without barriers of borders or the divisions of religion and nationality, and to consider the possibility that the whole of humanity could live unattached to material possessions. We present to you now Imagine. And our next song, and our last song, this last one we're going to sing before we get to you singing again, is from 1968. Does that date ring a bell in the context of where we are? Composed by Sly Stone and first recorded by his band Sly and the Family Stone. It was the first single by the band to go #1 on the soul single charts and the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 charts. This is one of Sly Stone's pleas for peace and equality between different races and social groups, a major theme and focus of the band. The Family Stone featured Caucasians Greg Rico and Jerry Martin in the lineup, as well as females Rose Stone and Cynthia Robinson, making it the first major integrated rock band in rock history. If you've heard this before, I dare you to not sing along. Everyday people. So now it's time for some more awards. And the next award up is the Vanessa Johnson Award, and that's going to be presented by Manny Conter. Manny? Oh, Manny. Sorry. Yeah, Manny, you see me. Willard. There he is.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First, let me start out by saying I'm really nervous. But it is quite an honor to have the opportunity to introduce Manny Content for the Vanessa Johnson Award. Let me just read a little bit about the significance of the award. It's given to recognize and encourage emerging leaders in movements for social justice. And some of you here knew and remember Vanessa Johnson. But for many years, she was very active here in the Manchester community. And I've known Manny for a while. When I moved to New Hampshire in the early 90s, our paths would cross occasionally, but we began to work more closely together more intensely. I think it was probably around 2001 when, after the urging of community members, I and others began working with a group of folk from an organization called Latinos Unidos New Hampshire to pull together a summer ethnic and culture festival. And during that process, some kind of way, somebody, I don't remember, it was a long time ago, I don't remember exactly who it was, but somebody said, hey, you ought to go over to Coca-Cola and talk to Manny Content. And we did. And as some of you know, I and others that I've worked with, we've done a lot of events over the years. And Manny has always been an important part of that. Manny is a Haitian descent, and he came to New Hampshire and went to school here. I believe he's a Central High grad. Is that right, Manny? Yeah, you know, and started working with Coca-Cola and sort of worked his way up through the ranks. But on his journey, Manny became involved with a number of different organizations, and that's part of how our paths crossed. He was active in the Manchester NAACP. A few years ago, probably like about 10, there was a major push around something called disproportionate minority contact by law enforcement, and there was an initiative started here in the state, and we did some work here in Manchester. Manny was part of that. In fact, it was through him and the resources, partly the resources from Coke, that there was developed a program called the Mirror Project that attempted to change, provide a setting that changed the power dynamic between youth and police officers in terms of trying to create greater understanding and working together. He was also active on the Police Department Community Advisory Board. I think he's currently serving as the Manchester Police Commissioner, and he has and I was asked to not forget to mention the great work that Manny has done with the Manchester Office of Youth Services Advisory Board. So as we go through life, all of us, we have this we have this opportunity called choice points, where we get to make choices about, what we do, whether we turn left or right. And oftentimes in our roles, we end up being gatekeepers, meaning we have the choice to either open the gate to allow people in and access to resources, or actually close the gate and, not allow that opportunity. Well, Manny is an example of leadership, of servant leadership, of community leadership. He is an example of the kind of quiet leadership that, in the words of Lao Tzu, called Manny to go to the people and work with the people. And when the work is done, the people say, we did it ourselves. So today, I'd like to introduce to some, present to others, the recipient of the Vanessa Johnson Award, the Quiet Warrior, Manny Content.
John Ron, thank you. Those that know me know that this is why I do what I do. And no emotion. Willard has been awesome to work with. A good man in the community. But the reason that I do what I do is you can do one of two things. You can sit on the sidelines and complain, or you can jump in the pit and try to make a difference and try to make a change. I have 5 wonderful grandkids. And I want to set the table for them. Thank you.
And now I would like to invite Judy Elliott up to the stage.
Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I will be presenting the Martin Luther King Jr. Award for 2020 to Brenda Lett. Brenda is not able to be here today, so her son Sudi, who is will be accepting the award for her. And Sudi himself is a rising leader in the Manchester community. If you don't know him yet, you will soon. It is an honor to speak about Brenda Lett, the 2020 Martin Luther King Jr. Award winner. Brenda is a strong, principled, creative, persistent, and beautiful woman. Brenda Lett is not afraid to speak her mind. So there are people here who know Brenda well. Over the decades, Brenda has been a leader in the struggle for human rights, self-determination, and the dignity of African descendants and all people, for the preservation and promotion of African culture, and in the nurture of her own beautiful family. 2 of whom, as you've seen, are here today, but before going further, I would like the members of the Lett family just to stand up, or if you're already standing up, to wave and be recognized. This is a powerhouse of a family, and we're lucky to have them here. And I would also like to ask Brenda's co-author, co-worker, and close friend, the wonderful Laura Lee Woodlock-Roy, to stand and be recognized. So together, Brenda and Lori Lee have written an amazing book. It's called Race Between Us, Racism, A Human Experience. And that's just it. It's a human experience, and we can talk about it. And Brenda and Lori Lee did talk about it wonderfully in the book. Brenda's accomplishments are too numerous to list now. You may know of some of them, beginning with the founding of the Ujima Collective, her work with the New Hampshire Black Women Health Collective, her work in corrections. But you don't know it all, because I don't know it all. You can learn a little more by looking in the program book later. And what I would just say about Brenda's current work, which is important to know about, is that Brenda is currently working for reparations as an officer of NCOBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. And she took a vanload of Manchester kids and youth out there to Detroit last summer so that they could understand what reparations are all about. And Brenda always cares about the rising leaders. Brenda is also now providing leadership for a new Manchester NAACP educational initiative for young people of color, and I believe that the name of that project is called the Saturday School. So please get in contact with Brenda if you would like to know more about this work and whether you might be able to contribute to it. I understand that she's available to speak sometimes to congregations and community groups about reparations, and that's something that we all need to be talking about. So to conclude, here are some of the things I have learned by knowing Brenda Lett. Brenda has taught me that racism is a deeply ingrained and persistent system that we European immigrants must continue to learn about and struggle against. Watching Brenda has taught me about being persistent and strong, although I got a lot to learn if I had ever to catch up with Brenda. Brenda has taught me the importance of respecting the elders and nurturing the youth. Finally, she has taught me about the strength of African culture, African women, and African families. Brenda Bailey Lett richly deserves the 2020 Martin Luther King Jr. Award. And I'm very proud to give this award to Senior Brenda's son.
Obviously, I'm not Brenda Lett. My mom sends her regards. I just want to tell you a little bit what it's like to be the son of Brenda Lett. One of the main things that I learned from my mom is to be fearless and to always do what's right. Doing what's right doesn't feel good all the time. We struggle with it. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it means you lose money. But there's something in doing what's right that fuels you as you continue to try to do this type of work. I want to thank Judy for that great introduction. She was laying it on a little thick. But what she did mention and what I do appreciate is that through the work of my parents, my father, and my mother, I've understood what it's like to be fearless, to have strength, and to try to inspire others. So on behalf of my mother, thank you so much.
So with that, we've come to our end of song, where you all get to participate again. And traditionally, the way that the song is sung is with everyone standing. So please stand. And traditionally, we all gather in a circle. So let's begin. We shall overcome.